Hello, this will be a demonstration of Proposition 10 from Book 5 of Euclid's Elements, which says that of magnitudes that have a ratio to the same, that which has the greater ratio is greater, and that to which the same has the greater ratio is less. This is the converse to 5.8, so the previous proposition 5.9 was the converse to 5.7. This proposition 5.10 is the converse to 5.8. So instead of being given the situation about the magnitudes and from that inferring something about the ratio, we're given the ratios and then proving something about the magnitudes. What we're then given is either that the ratio that A has to C is greater than the ratio that B has to C, or that the ratio C has to B is greater than the ratio that C has to A. In either case, we're going to prove that A is greater than B. Now, like 5.9, we do this with reductio. If it is not the case that A is greater than B, then either A is equal to B or A is less than B. Those are the only three options. This is often called the law of trichotomy, that of magnitudes of the same type, like if you have two magnitudes like x and y, x is either greater than, equal to, or less than y. This is simply true. And so if A is not greater than B, then it must have one of these other two relationships to it. Now, if A is equal to B, then by 5.7 we know that A has to C an equal rate, or has to it the same ratio that B has to C, right? That's 5.7, that equal magnitudes have to the same ratio. And so if A be equal to B, then A is to C just as B is to C. But we were given that A has to C a greater ratio than B has to C. And so the ratio A to C must simultaneously be greater than the ratio B to C by our given, but it must also be equal to it by the previous step. And so A to C has to simultaneously be equal to and greater than B to C. This is obviously absurd. And so we know that A cannot be equal to B, because then we happen upon this absurdity. Neither can A be greater than B, neither can A be less than B. For if A be less than B, then the ratio A to C is less than the ratio B to C. Right, because of unequal magnitudes, this is 5.8, of unequal magnitudes, the greater has to the same the greater ratio. And so if A is less than B, then B is obviously greater than A, which means that B has to C a greater ratio than A has to C, which of course means that A has to C a lesser ratio than B has to C. But if we were given that A has to C a greater ratio than B has to C, and so the ratio A to C must simultaneously be greater than and less than the ratio B to C. This is patently absurd. And so A cannot be less than B. And so A being neither equal to B nor being less than B, it must then be the case that A is greater than B. And this is what we set out to prove. We set out to prove that A is greater than B. So we're done with this first case. Now, our second case is where we're given the fact that C has to B a greater ratio than C has to A. We're likewise going to prove that A is greater than B. For if it is not the case that A is greater than B, again, A must either be equal to B or it must be less than B. Now, if A be equal to B, then C has to be the same ratio that C has to A. This is again proposition 5.7, but the second part of the enunciation, that the same magnitude has to equal magnitudes of the same ratio. And so if A be equal to B, C to B, or C is to B just as C is to A. But we were given that C to B is greater than C to A. And so the ratio C to B must simultaneously be greater than and equal to the ratio C to A, which cannot be the case, which means that A cannot be equal to B. Nor can A be less than B. For if A be less than B, then the ratio C to A must be greater than the ratio C to B. This is 5.8, but again, the second part of it, that the same has to the lesser magnitude a greater ratio. And so if A be less than B, then the ratio C to A must be greater than the ratio C to B, which of course means that the ratio C to B is less than the ratio C to A. But again, we were given that the ratio C to B is greater than the ratio C to A, and so this ratio C to B must simultaneously be greater than and less than the ratio C to A, which is impossible, and so A cannot be less than B. And so, well, A can't be equal to B, and A can't be less than B. That leaves us with the fact that A has to be greater than B, which is what we set out to prove, which means we are done with the proposition, therefore, etc., Q, E, D. I have nothing to add to this proposition, so I'll end the video here and move on to proposition 511.